Good morning and welcome to this week's episode of the Last Night's Game podcast. If you've ever nodded along during a sports conversation hoping no one asks you a follow-up question, I've done that. This episode is for you. Today we're simplifying sports terms you hear all the time, like name, image, likeness, or NIL or NIL, the transfer portal, tanking, and translating them all into plain English you can add. It's not about memorizing stats or sounding like a super fan. It's about knowing just enough to jump into the conversation, maybe ask a smart question, or feel confident saying something without overthinking it. And the best part, we're telling you what you don't need to know because the sports conversations aren't about being right. They're about being in the moment. And here to talk all about it is the guy who lives in the moment, Scott. Scott, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on. And you said it perfect that sports conversations, you don't have to be right about anything. As we've seen
True.
on television, you can just be wrong and keep debating it and die on your sword as long as you sound passionate.
You have to have a conviction.
Yes. So we're here to give you some conversation starters in case you want to be a competitive spectator or if you're feeling athletic adjacent.
Oh, I like this. I am
You
definitely
will
what I
be
would call
ready to go. We'll give you the ammunition needed.
yeah, I'm definitely what you would call athletic adjacent.
We
Yeah.
all are nowadays.
It's true. You reach a certain point.
Yeah.
Pickleball's your sport, then you're all set.
That's still, I think it's athletic adjacent.
It's probably a true statement. So,
Yeah.
okay, so this really came up because we were having the conversation around Brock Purdy, who is Mr. Irrelevant, which we'll talk about in a minute. But it really came up that there are all these random terms that sports people sort of use as common English. And that's so obvious in any sort of industry you're in. If you've ever been to a meeting with your accountant, you're like, I'm sorry, what do those acronyms mean? Thank you so much. And so this really is breaking down this sort of common language that you may have heard, but never have been able to put two and two together to figure out exactly what it means or just know enough. So that's what we're going to talk through today. So let's start off with nil, name, image, likeness. Dive into that for us. What the heck does name, image, likeness mean in plain English?
And this is a new one that we've just had in the past few years. So I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't understand the translation or even have any clue what is being said when it's being talked about. I'll break it down for you the best we can. So NIL is name, image, likeness. So this applies to college sports where forever athletes could not profit off their name, image, or likeness. The school would be selling jerseys with their number on it and taking all the profit, profiting off all of their, you know, popularity with football, with winning the Heisman or, winning a national championship. The school would be the only one to benefit. And that has changed in the past few years. Now these players are able to take advantage of their popularity with name, image, and likeness.
I mean, that was coming down to even like Olympic swimmers, like Katie Ledecky, who was swimming for a school.
Mhm.
On her day job, she was a university student and a university swimmer, and she couldn't get money from the Visa commercial that she was in that was helping fund the Olympic team. She could get no piece of that. And so that was against the rules. So it's really been interesting to watch how this has shifted the whole model. Obviously, the biggest thing here is football. That really is because that's obviously the money grab. And what that really means is what we're seeing, and the reason this is kind of a big deal is that not that they're paying players, but that players are then changing schools or going to schools because they can offer them more money because schools have started collectives and different things that they can essentially pay them a salary, right?
Yes, there's all kinds of different options to be paid now. And you're seeing the top tier programs who have the most money are able to pay the most to get their desired players to their school. And it's kind of more of a social experiment of just because you throw money at something does not necessarily mean it's going to work.
And I mean, we could talk about the Yankees
Mhm.
for a long time, right? They were really good for a
Forever.
while, but then you had teams and then they what was that? So probably 2000s. I mean, they were just pouring all this money into it, and they still are. And but not winning championships, the Mets. You have to have
Mets are a great example currently. That
some
just
sort of
because you have money, yeah.
chemistry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think what we've seen with teams that have been successful in college football this year, like Miami and Indiana, while they do have very solid budgets for NIL, they've used it in good ways to bring in players that fit their program and not necessarily just a big name just to throw money at them.
Right. And so it's been really interesting, but you do see some of these, kids that do well in smaller schools, then
Mhm.
all of a sudden get elevated because they can now make money 2 years into their career, their college career, and go somewhere
Mhm.
and make money. So it's been really interesting because there's I think the common theme between this too is that there's really not a lot of loyalty to schools. And so that seems to be, I mean, you look at Fernando Mendoza, who
Mhm.
came in and could have made more money somewhere else, but went to Indiana because he felt like that was the right fit for him when he came from Cal. And so you have people doing that, but it's still, then you have players abandoning ship left and right. There's no loyalty when it comes down to it.
Yeah, and I think they've put, you know, 19, 20-year-old kids in a precarious situation kind of that maybe kids from who didn't come from a lot of money and then they're promised all this money to transfer schools and maybe the deal falls through or it's the Wild West right now. We still really don't know have much regulation on anything. So kids can be promised something and then it never happens and then they've already transferred and it kind of doesn't work out the way they hoped. So
Mhm.
it's really the Wild West at this time still. I don't know if we'll ever get it like reeled back in.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So this kind of leads us into our second term, the transfer portal. So the transfer portal and NIL kind of rolled out together. And from all conversations I've ever had with sports people, that's sort of the hot mess is the
Mhm.
two of them together. Because before, correct me if I'm wrong, before if you changed schools, you would have to sit out a year.
If you change schools across the same level, like if you transferred from Miami to an Indiana, you would have to sit out a year. And that kind of prevented people from just transferring nonstop. And now that does not exist anymore. There was two, well, transfer portal kind of sounds like a mythical thing you jump into.
Yeah, something in Star Trek.
And yeah, and you end up at a school that you want to go to. But and they did have two transfer portal windows for football, which made it a mess. One in January, and then one after spring. So you would have a spring football, so you could transfer in January, do spring football at a school, and then transfer to another school after that. So it was a mess. They've limited it to one now, where we're at now with just one time in January, which is helpful because kids were. I mean, it's not. I'm not going to blame anyone for doing that, but it was when the adults can't figure things out, how do they expect kids to,
Mhm.
know what they're doing? So at least they've reined it in a little bit.
Well, it's just really interesting and that the transfer portal opens up before the college football season is over.
Yes.
And so that also makes it really sticky. Like the season's not done. There are still teams in the playoffs. And I know that there's a lot of sports where they really reserve till after their championship. Then things can happen. You can make major announcements, all those
Mhm.
things, but none of that happens until the season is over. Where this just to me, if I'm the NCAA, I'm also looking at more opportunities to keep my name in the media as long as possible. So if I wait my transfer portal till the national championship is over, then I can have a month or 2 of my name, my colleges in the headlines versus other sports too. But what do I know? I'm not in charge of the NCAA.
You're far too logical to be in charge of the NCAA. They just I think they throw like darts at a wall and see what sticks. And then like the transfer portal, where we have over 4,000 players enter it. So it's kind of killed bowl season a little bit. Well, a lot because you have kids in bowls, even the national championship. We have a handful of guys in the portal who play in the national championship. So it doesn't necessarily even matter how successful your team is.
Well, okay, so I looked up and I was seeing the transfer portals open no matter what division you're in, whether you're in
Hmm.
D1 or a junior college, that kind of stuff, right?
Yes.
So there's 4,000 players for perspective. Now, these are
Hmm.
multiple levels of football, but according to my quick search, there's about 81,000 college football players.
Hmm.
But that's the junior college level. That's all the way down, all the way up. But 4,000 players, that's a lot of players.
That's a lot, especially when you have teams in bowls and national championships and things. So it puts a lot of programs in a lot of bad places. And then on top of that, you have coaches leaving too. So you have coaches leaving, players leaving. You don't know who's on your roster. You have to re-recruit your own guys to keep them there. So we've seen. I know you saw from your neck of the woods, Tulsa set up a transfer portal house
Mhm.
to really emphasize it. So these teams are getting a little bit creative. And a school like Tulsa obviously doesn't have the massive budget of an Ohio State or a,
No, and when
you
they're
know,
good, people are good, they leave and they go somewhere
yeah,
else.
and that's where
Yeah,
they get poached.
yeah, it's really interesting that you're also seeing this more from the business side of schools where coaches are having to coach, but then they're also having to do this name, image, likeness stuff, transfer
Hmm.
port, like all of this. So you're seeing teams bring in a general manager type of a role or president of the team, something that's the business operations of that. Because was it you that was telling me that one of the coaches was in a press conference and he said, well, after I leave this press conference, I have to go meet with someone's roommate about what they think their NIL value is,
Mhm.
and then meet with somebody else about that, and then try to run a practice and review tape and all of these things. And it's like, it's too much for a
Yeah,
coach to be successful.
we've seen I think every coach has probably said that in every press conference,
Probably
but
true.
we've seen a lot of coaches just leave or retire because it's become such a mess. Just because they're doing it's not just coaching anymore. You're doing all this nonsense outside of football that is just cumbersome.
Yeah, it's so interesting. So that's one that, there's no limitations, there's not a lot of structure around that yet. I do think that's something they're going to continue to morph and continue to work on because
Hmm.
it's got to happen. There's gonna be too much, there's gonna be an uproar. I mean, coaches are already losing their minds and are really pissed about it. And so it's one
Yes.
of those where there's gonna be some I think there's going to be some regulation at some point. So stay tuned for that. But that's transfer portal 101.
Yes.
One of the things that, we talk about, like, what you don't need to talk about in transfer portal eligibility, not important. If you wanna go someone wants to go down that conversation, don't go down that conversation with them. You
No.
don't need to know about timelines or how many times a player can transfer, which I believe right now is unlimited.
Hmm.
So, stick with the conversation, you know what the transfer portal is, something from Star Trek, we can leave it at that.
Yeah.
Now let's dive into Mr. Irrelevant. So this is one of my favorites, and I love this story because I love the story of Brock Purdy, who's a quarterback for the 49ers. He was Mr. Irrelevant. So talk to everybody about what Mr. Irrelevant is.
And Mr. Irrelevant was very irrelevant for a very long time until Brock Purdy was drafted by the 49ers out of Iowa State. So Mr. Irrelevant is the last pick in the NFL draft. Although it may sound like a bad thing, they've turned it into kind of this, they've given it a nickname. There's actually, what is it, a charity that
They do
goes
a get
along with
together
it
every year
now.
and
They
with
have like
yeah,
a
yeah,
Mr.
with charity
Irrelevant
component.
club.
Yep.
So, they've kind of embraced it. At least you're getting drafted. So at least you can tell people you got drafted. And up until Brock Purdy, they've really never done anything in the league. He was the first ever Mr. Relevant to throw a touchdown pass, first ever to make it to Super Bowl. So he's really a trailblazer to making Mr. Irrelevant relevant.
And to give you perspective, the first round of the draft,
Mhm.
those players are the ones making millions, they're likely to make a roster. From the second round on down, it can be questionable, right? The dollar amount changes massively from 1 to 40. So we have what 30 teams in the 30 picks in the first round, 30 picks in each round, is that right?
Give or take, yeah, depending on
Who
trades and
drop
whatnot.
where? Trades and all
Yeah.
that that's not too technical.
Yeah.
One of those that like it's a massive pay difference. It's a massive position. Will you actually make the team difference?
Mhm.
So there's typically around 257 players picked in the NFL draft. And so imagine number one's a shoe in,
Mhm.
257. There are 257 people picked before this Mr. Irrelevant. And like you said, they've had get togethers now, they do a charitable component.
Mhm.
It's not unheard of. I mean, Tom Brady was pretty far down the line, if I remember correct as well.
Was
And
it six
so
six round, I think, 192? Give or
some six, yeah, I remember
somewhere
me.
on there, yeah.
So he didn't seem like a logical choice either. So you do have these glimmers of hope, obviously, a
Yes.
Brock Purdy, somebody like that. But it's so fascinating that they are able to he was able to do something with it. And it was, I mean, when he was starting games because he was a Mr. Relevant, he didn't have a big contract.
No, I don't think I don't think he could even afford rent in San
San
Francisco.
Francisco, no, I think he had roommates and I mean, living with parents like that's a scenario where he wasn't making a lot of money. He's
No.
playing against guys he's making the league minimum, and he's playing against starting quarterbacks who have $1,000,000 contracts.
Yeah, I think they played Mahomes in the Super Bowl. I think Mahomes was making like 45 million, and he was making like, I don't know. It's still a good amount of money, maybe 800,000 or something.
But yeah, I
In the
mean, not compared
grand
to
scheme of
forty
things
five
in
million.
professional athlete world, it's not a lot. To put in that perspective, yes. And if you're smart, like you can take advantage of that as a team. We'll talk about something in a little bit
I was gonna say that
with
was
the
my next
salary
one.
cap. So if you're smart, you have a quarterback at 800,000 that can start and is effective. You can spread that money around and get a better team.
That's true. So let's dive into salary cap. So that's the next one. What is a salary cap? Now, baseball calls it a luxury tax.
Mhm.
So it's not the same, it's a little different, but, talk to me about a salary tax.
And this is a set amount that the league has that each team is allowed to spend up to that amount of money to construct their roster. And this is put in place to prevent, a New York team in New York from just loading up because they have all the money and the revenue coming in from being in New York, as opposed to a team maybe like in Indiana or in the past Oklahoma City, although they've done a very good job of drafting players and signing them.
The
So
NBA, yep.
yeah, it's trying to make smaller markets relevant and competitive.
So, let's just take the NBA, for instance. If
Mhm.
Can you go over your salary cap? Because I know in baseball, if you go over, you're taxed heavily, and that money that is taxed is distributed
Mhm.
back to the other teams. So,
Yes.
how does that work in the NBA and other leagues that is not called a luxury tax?
NBA's made it incredibly complicated to understand.
Okay,
They have
let's not go too
aprons.
complicated.
Yeah, they have aprons of tax in which if you spend above a certain amount, you get hit with penalties and things like that. So they made it
Okay, so there is a
incredibly complicated.
penalty.
Yes, yes, and they've made a mess of it. But long story short, it's how much you can spend. If you go over that, you end up getting taxed. So there's a deterrent to try to keep you from going over.
I have this visual of NBA players in aprons currently, so that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I think there's like 1, 2, and 3 aprons. It's very complicated that I think
Okay, so
one person
essentially,
might understand. Yes.
this is a salary cap or a luxury tax. Here's your dollar amount you're allowed to spend. If you go over, you're
Yes.
penalized.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I've got that.
Competitive
Okay,
balance is what it's trying to.
competitive balance. I like this.
Yes.
I feel like that's like peanut butter and jelly, vodka cranberry,
Lamb
competitive
and tuna
balance.
fish. Yeah.
Lamb and tuna fish. So let's talk about the transfer window or trade deadline. Now, I know every league is different, but essentially you see these things in news and it's like the transfer deadline's coming up or the trade deadline's coming up. Transfer window, trade deadline, might confuse those two, sorry. The trade deadline's coming up. You're going to see all these moves that happen.
Mm.
Talk to me about a trade deadline.
So trade deadline is typically going to be around mid-season, give or take, for each league. And that's the point cutoff where you can trade players to a new team or acquire new players via trade in attempts to improve your team. Or if your team is not doing well and you're kind of tanking, you can offload players that have large contracts or that you see value in and hope to get something back to improve in the future. So it's either you're going for it or you're giving up kind of at that point.
So my question is, can I not trade outside that window? Is it built into because the playoffs are coming up or like am I not allowed to trade otherwise?
After the trade deadline, you cannot trade, but I mean, you can release players and then it goes through like a whole process of waivers where any team can pick them up. So you can't trade directly to a team, but you could release someone. And then depending on, whatever waiver order you have, they can be picked up, but not directly by a certain team.
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. I'm not making a trade with you. I'm saying put them into the pool and then
Yeah.
let
And
somebody else pick
if you
them.
want them, you can go get them and do it that way, but you're not really trading them.
Got it. Okay, that makes so much more sense. Okay, we have a couple terms and I want to keep us close to our time frame here that I'm going
Mhm.
to kind of breeze through here. Talk to me about tanking. Has nothing to do with gasoline.
Nothing to do with gasoline or fish. This is when a sports team kind of realizes maybe they're not going to be competitive at maybe at like a trade deadline, and they realize that if they can get rid of large contracts and big players, they can get prospects and draft picks back in attempt to rebuild and eventually maybe hopefully become good. And so
So
you
it's a
have
move to
teams like yeah, and if you're a team that never has a good draft pick because you finish in the middle of the pack every time, this is a way to do it. It may not be great for your fans. I mean, we saw the Cubs do it and then win a World Series. I mean, you're going to suffer for a few seasons until these guys
Mhm.
get experience and get up to par, but it's a long-term investment strategy if you want to look at it that way.
Okay. So tanking long term is
Yes, we
we're
saw
betting on
with
the future.
Oklahoma City kind of did that. Not necessarily tanking terribly, but they were investing in their future.
Yeah, I mean, and they still have multiple,
Mhm.
early round draft picks because they've jockeyed with other teams for big name players and different things
Mhm.
like that. The scenario of that your GM is sorting out is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and there's some franchises, unfortunately, for the fans that they're just perennially tanking. And
Got it.
and there's always this trust the process, which was the 76ers motto. And the process took a very, very long time and has still not been completed.
Process is still good.
It's still processing, well, like year 10 of the process, probably.
And to clarify, in all the leagues, the worse you are, the higher your draft pick is for the next draft.
Yes.
They're all structured a little bit differently in terms of who gets that actual number one pick. But essentially, the worse you are, the higher you are to get, or closer you are to getting a first round draft pick
And hopefully getting the top talent that can change your franchise.
after they come out of the NIL madness of college.
And
Okay,
yes,
wild card. We just, we're in the midst of the NFL playoffs and we're rolling into NBA playoffs here in a couple months. Talk to me about what a wild card is besides something
it's
in
not
Uno.
it's not a card that you can make anything that you want. A wild card in sports is going to be typically your division winners are going to be guaranteed a playoff spot. And then after that, once you get all the division winners, the wild card teams would be teams that did not win their division, were not guaranteed a spot until they qualified based on record. So,
So they're kind of so it's a team that makes the playoffs without winning their division. And they tend to be the ones to watch because they usually come in hot. They know they're the underdog. They have nothing to
mhm.
lose. So a wild card team tends to be a bit dangerous.
They typically do, like you said, maybe a team in first place is 14-2 and hasn't really had to play a competitive game in a month, as to where you have a team that's been fighting basically kind of in the playoffs half the season with momentum on their side going into the playoffs. And they don't get buys, so they have to play every round where like a top seed gets a bye and takes time off, and that just kills momentum. So we've seen a lot of, I think I'm looking here, it's 20 have won the Super Bowl as a wild card, which is pretty stunning because they have all the momentum and they've just been fighting for their lives for a long time.
Mhm.
And as good as buys are to rest, we've seen it kill momentum for baseball a lot. We see it a lot in baseball, football
That
for
actually is
sure.
that's a perfect lead into my last one. I'm gonna see if you how fast you can conquer this one. Load
Okay.
management.
This is a complex one. This has
It
become
is, but
very
it is simplified.
simplified, means resting star players to avoid injury during the regular season to have postseason success.
And this is really a big NBA term, it
It's,
seems like.
it is a very big NBA term, despite all the luxuries of flying in private planes and the top technology to recover. We've seen that NBA load management has become a huge epidemic with star players sitting out, not playing nationally televised TV games. So they've even had to implement rules and penalties to force star players to play. One of the rules they have now is that you have to play 65 games out of 82 games to even qualify for an award like an MVP or a defensive player of the year. So that's kind of one of the bases, and they also have penalties for sitting players during nationally televised games.
When networks are paying lots of money, stop sitting LeBron
Yes,
James is what I hear you saying.
it's all about the
Okay.
money. Yes, we don't care if you sit him on Tuesday against Sacramento on local TV, but
Don't piss off NBC.
ESPN Saturday night, you better believe he'll be on it.
Well, I love this. Thank you for breaking these down I always learn something new every time we do the podcast. So thank you for filling me in and filling the audience in on that. And I hope if there's one thing you take away from this episode, it's that you don't need to know everything about sports to talk about sports. Knowing a few key terms is often all it takes to be confident in joining the conversation. And here's my thing. If you hear something you don't understand, curiosity beats expertise every time. I ask all the time. You can ask Scott. I ask questions all the time because I want to learn, but also
Mhm.
I don't need to be a sports expert. I have this beautiful brain of a sports expert at my disposal. So I love being able to ask him questions. So this is how conversations get easier, connections feel more natural, and sports becomes less intimidating and a lot more fun. And thanks for joining me today, Scott. And that's the sports news you'll want to spill.